Signified and signifier. The terms signified and signifier are most commonly related to semiotics, which is defined by Oxford Dictionaries Online as the study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. Ferdinand de Saussure, a Swiss linguist, was one of the two founders of semiotics. Saussure explained that a sign was not only a sound image, but also a concept. Thus he divided the sign into two components: the signifier, or sound image, and the signified, or concept. For Saussure, the signified and signifier were purely psychological, they were form rather than substance. Today, the signifier is interpreted as the material form, something which can be seen, heard, touched, smelled or tasted, and the signified is the mental concept. Wikipedia. In ontological mathematics, the signifier is the unseen nominal signifier, the ontological syntax, while the signified, the semantics, is the perceived, phenomenal experience we actually have when we encounter the signifier. We experience information, the signified, but not the information carrier, the signifier. Rudolf Carnap said that all philosophical problems were really syntactical problems. Sort out the syntax, and the problems would vanish. We say that all the problems of philosophy concern the syntax and semantics of mathematics, and nothing else. The syntax and semantics of arbitrary, man-made languages relate to fantasy, religion, myth, politics, psychology, sociology, and so on. Man-made languages have nothing to do with reality, with why we exist, what we are doing, and where we are going. Man-made languages, words, tell us an emotive story, myth. Natural language, numbers, tells us the analytic truth. Any philosophy not based on numbers, math, reason and logic is a pseudo-philosophy. Pseudo-philosophy is what Discordians attack. Their problem is that they regard all philosophy as pseudo, and everything as man-made, hence subjective, relative, and unconnected to objective truth and reality. They are sophists who agree with Protagoras that man is the measure of all things. And, of course, their own philosophy is itself a pseudo-philosophy. All serious philosophers oppose the anti-philosophy and pseudo-philosophy of Discordianism, although many strands of postmodern philosophy reflect Discordian tropes, but much more intelligently. In the logical syntax of language, Carnap said, philosophy is to be replaced by the logic of science, that is to say, by the logical analysis of the concepts and sentences of the sciences, for the logic of science is nothing other than the logical syntax of the language of science. We want to replace philosophy with the logic of mathematics, by the logical analysis of the concepts and sentences of mathematics, always ensuring that any statements about semantics are firmly grounded in syntax, i.e. we must trace everything back to the properties of waves with their dual aspect ontology of form and content, information carrier and information carried, map and territory, phenomenon and noumenon, rationalist aspect and empiricist aspect, signifier and signified. By the logical syntax of a language, we mean the formal theory of the linguistic forms of that language, the systematic statement of the formal rules which govern it, together with the development of the consequences which follow from these rules. A theory, a rule, a definition, or the like is to be called formal, when no reference is made in it, either to the meaning of the symbols, for examples, the words, or to the sense of the expressions, e.g. the sentences, but simply and solely to the kinds and order of the symbols from which the expressions are constructed. Carnap. The only natural language is that of numbers, math, not that of man-made words. All word-based philosophies are necessarily false. According to this view, the sentences of metaphysics are pseudo-sentences which on logical analysis are proved to be either empty phrases or phrases which violate the rules of syntax. Of the so-called philosophical problems, the only questions which have any meaning are those of the logic of science. To share this view is to substitute logical syntax for philosophy. Carnap. We are substituting logical mathematical syntax and semantics for philosophy. In order to determine whether or not one sentence is a consequence of another, no reference need be made to the meaning of the sentences. The mere statement of the truth values is certainly too little, but the statement of the meaning is, on the other hand, too much. It is sufficient that the syntactical design of the sentences be given. Carnap we can carry out a strictly syntactical study of ontological mathematics and then draw semantic conclusions from what the syntax makes possible, i.e., the mental evolution of the universe, to the extent of mind ultimately overwhelming matter, which is merely math passed through the dimensionality filter of space and time, which are themselves merely products of Fourier mathematics. Frequencies in the mental singularity are the basis of time and space in the material universe, once non-orthogonal asymmetry resulting from phase is factored in. It was Rudolf Carnap's dream for the last 3 decades of his life to show that science proceeds by a formal syntactic method. Today no one to my knowledge holds out any hope for that project. Hilary Putnam we are effectively replacing Carnap's ideas regarding science with those regarding ontological mathematics, and also adding a semantic layer. Necessarily rather than arbitrarily linked to the syntactical layer. Saussure pointed out, with respect to man-made languages, that the link between signifier and signified is arbitrary. We are saying that, with respect to natural language, the link is necessary, i.e. if you encounter a wave with a specific frequency, the signifier, an exact experience, the signified, will always correspond to this, e.g. a specific wave frequency causes the color blue, and there is nothing arbitrary about this. If we were sophisticated enough, we could read off all hidden signifiers, noumena, from the visible signifieds, phenomena, that we actually experience and encounter. In our system, signifier is the syntax, and the signified is the semantics, i.e. the meaningful experience, whether a feeling, perception, sensation, intuition or thought that accompanies the syntax. This is a dual aspect system reflecting a syntactical carrier, a mathematical wave, and a semantic experience associated with it, the information carried by the mathematical wave. Humans assign meaning and significance to the experience, not to the carrier of the experience, which is typically treated by science as an unseen, unreal nominal abstraction, a quantum mechanical Wöhler function, which does not become real until it is collapsed by an observation, i.e. an experience. In our system, the quantum mechanical Wöhler function is real, hence has no need of any arbitrary and unexplained collapse mechanism. It is always associated with an experience, with observational and empirical semantic properties. Observers are not required to confer properties upon the Wöhler function. It possesses them necessarily. A straightforward PhD thesis would be to take Carnap's work and recast it in terms of ontological mathematics, rather than science, to establish a proper rationalist logical positivism, rather than one incoherently based on scientific empiricism, falsification and verification, all of which are contrary to logic. Or to interpret the quantum mechanical Wöhler function in the radical new way we have suggested, with quantum mechanical Wöhler functions ultimately deriving from monadic singularities, each made of a complete and consistent set of mathematical waves. Mathematical semantics is all about what meaning we can derive from the fact that math is real and concrete, rather than unreal and abstract, as scientists and even most mathematicians claim. Plainly, no semantic analysis can be applied to something regarded as unreal, abstract pure syntax, with no ontological significance, as math is currently regarded. Math is the ontological syntax of reality. All valid true meanings are invested in this valid true ontological syntax. Everything else is literally nonsense and fantasy, including the vast bulk of philosophy, the common, misright parenthesis interpretation of science, and the prevailing, misright parenthesis interpretation of mathematics based on set theory. Set theory has absolutely no connection to ontological mathematics, and is just another spurious philosophy, a pseudo-philosophy, based on empiricist ideology, tacked on to math. A set is not a number and has no ontology, hence is totally invalid in terms of what we are doing. The set of numbers is not a number. Numbers can be manipulated by mathematics. Sets of numbers are not mathematical and cannot be manipulated by mathematics. There is no Leibnizian calculus regarding the constitution and the movement of arbitrary, abstract sets. Sets are manipulated via bogus language-based logic and axioms, a procedure which necessarily generates paradoxes. No such paradoxes exist in the real world. If you gather together all of the cans of baked beans in Germany, you would be able to point to those cans. You would not be able to point to the set of all cans of baked beans in Germany. This set is a concept manipulated in the mind. It is not a real ontological entity in the world. The cans are real, the set of cans isn't, individual humans are real, humanity is an abstraction. The paradox of the set of all sets that are not members of themselves is not a mathematical problem, and it is not an ontological problem. It's a bogus problem of wordplay and logical confusion over self-reference and subjectivity, as opposed to other reference and objectivity. The same problem infects Gödel's work on incompleteness. The only valid reason you would have for referring to set theory would be to refute it. We are moving mathematics away from set theory and turning it into a theory concerning points, movement, circles and waves. Sets do not feature at all. Our work is all about real concrete ontology. Our task is to eliminate all reference to unreal abstract concepts with no ontological significance or relevance. Sets are a catastrophe in terms of the promotion of our view. They are the antithesis of what we are doing. They are the exact problem we are seeking to overcome, the exact means by which the impression is given that math has no connection to reality, but is just a set of logical, abstract statements generated by human minds, just another man-made language. One day, the entire basis on which math is currently taught will be abandoned. 1,000 years from now, no one will have heard of the set theory of mathematics. Duality, because the photon, which, as everyone knows, is a wave, is also a particle. Why should not the electron, or any material particle, also be a wave? Louis de Broglie, I was convinced that the wave-particle duality discovered by Einstein in his theory of light quanta was absolutely general and extended to all of the physical world, and it seems certain to me, therefore, that the propagation of a wave is associated with the motion of a particle of any sort, photon, electron, proton or any other. Louis de Broglie, why should wave-particle duality extend to all things unless all things share a common origin? If light is the basis of all things, we should not be surprised at all that matter reflects key properties of light. If light is not the basis of all things, it is extraordinary that it has any commonality at all with material particles. There would be no reason for commonality, and indeed a specific reason for non-commonality, i.e. non-matter, mind, cannot be compatible with matter, going back to Cartesian dualism. The fact that material particles reflect the properties of light particles, mind particles, means that matter comes from mind, that the dimensional comes from the dimensionless, while the reverse can't be true. It would seem that the basic idea of the quantum theory is the impossibility of imagining an isolated quantity of energy without associating with it a certain frequency. Louis de Broglie, energy cannot be conceived as anything other than a property of a flowing point. Energy cannot be divorced from the flowing point, and thus from circles and sinusoidal waves, hence energy is always associated with a speed, with a frequency, and with a wavelength. It also has a mass. A photon has a mass that averages to 0 over the course of a complete Euler circle. Particles in the spacetime domain have masses that do not average to 0. Think again, we have said that 360 degrees is the maximum natural wavelength. The more astute of our readers will say, aha, but what if we have wave cycles that take place over 720 degrees, 1080 degrees, and all other multiples of 360 degrees, rather than just 360 degrees? Indeed. And if we do this, then we get frequencies less than 1, e.g. if wavelength equals 2, 720 degrees, then the relevant frequency is 1/2. We get far more powerful symmetry between frequency and wavelength if we make this adjustment. This procedure allows us to put wavelength and frequency on an equal footing. However, the same arguments as before will apply, i.e. we will reach a lowest possible frequency, and this will provide a limit for the highest possible wavelength. Anything for which a sufficient reason exists will happen. Things for which there is no sufficient reason will not happen. Zero entropy. The mental universe that precedes the Big Bang has zero entropy. It is perfectly organized. It contains no disorder, asymmetry whatsoever. The Big Bang universe produces entropy. The Big Crunch removes entropy. No understanding scientists like to apply science. They don't like to understand science. That's because they are irrationalists who despise philosophy. Philosophy is about clear and deep thinking. Science is about murky and shallow thinking. Scientists do not comprehend anything in depth. They have no regard for ontology and epistemology. They take a useful result and run with it. They don't care about the coherence and integrity of a result, only its productivity. They are practical people, not intellectual people. That's why science is offensive to rationalists.